Today, we are going to be having a really nice technical assistance chat today with a special guest. So we are doing a chat today on coaching strategies to increase fidelity of PBIS. And our special guest today is Michael Kanuski, and he is going to be sharing some of the things that he has been doing to help support PBIS in Palm Beach County. Thank you. And joining him today from the project are Robin Vanover and Stephanie Martinez. So I'm going to go ahead and let them get started. And again, I'll put the chat in the chat. I will put the handouts for today for those of you just joining us. So I will turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Betsy. So today we're here to talk about coaching strategies to increase fidelity. So as one of the project goals, it's not just about training the schools for implementation, but to get schools to the point where they're implementing with fidelity. So we're going to have a big focus on Tier 1 today, but this also applies for Tier 2 and Tier 3. So we'll move into the agenda. We're going to talk about coaching and fidelity. That's where I'll come in. I'm Stephanie Martinez, and then I'm going to turn it over to Robin and Michael to talk about coaching school-based PBIS teams and a district example from Palm Beach County. So if you haven't done this already, if you could change your Zoom name or put in the chat box your name, your role, your school or school district, and then answer one of these two questions. You don't have to answer both of them. Unless you want to. The first one is, what is one thing you know about Tier 1 PBIS and coaching? Or what is one question you have about Tier 1 PBIS and coaching? I'm seeing some people identifying where they're from. We've got St. John's represented today. Thank you. Going to use my good teacher wait time to see some of those responses come in. Either question one about what you know about coaching or what question do you have? Oh, we've got representation from Minnesota today. Thank you, Erin, for coming. And she answered the question about what things she knows. And she knows that coaching is an essential component for implementation to fidelity. We're going to be talking about that today. Thank you, Erin, for your participation. We've got Trish joining us from Western Australia as a trainer and coach. And Francine from Palm Beach says, I'm a better coach when I ask questions and spend time observing. That's a great strategy before jumping in. Going to wait another couple seconds and then we'll move on. Julie shares that PBIS coaching is spending time on each campus and then sharing amongst their schools. I like to beg, borrow, and steal ideas and share across. I will give credit where credit is due when it's not something that I've personally come up with or observed. So thank you. If you want to continue to answer those questions, we will continue to monitor the chat box. So why is coaching important? If you've never read the study by Josh and Showers, it's been around for a long time. It's one actually my favorite studies. And it really hit home to me. I was a former classroom teacher and I went to our district trainings and to get my professional development points. Some things were assigned to me and I would leave those trainings and go back and implement in my classroom or try to implement what I was taught during those trainings. I'm a pretty smart person, but sometimes I would struggle and not know how to go back and actually implement those strategies or who to even reach out to if I came across a barrier or hurdle. So what this shows us by Joyce and Showers is that they research what is good practice for training and then coaching for implementation to fidelity. So what they found is when we do the traditional just present and lecture information, The translation from that training into actually implementation is very small. If you add into that some demonstration, it does increase the implementation back on a school campus, so whether it's a classroom or school-wide. If you add the practice to that training, it increases the implementation. But what Joyce and Showers found was if you do all of those and add in coaching with feedback and use of data as part of that coaching and feedback process, you have a better implementation of what was learned during the training. So I want you to think about today, what is the ultimate goal of coaching? And its ultimate goal is for implementation with Fidelity. And so that's why one of the things that we always recommend in addition to training is what is that ongoing support that the district can provide to schools around coaching. That may include your point of contact at your school getting some additional, and they provide some of that coaching and ongoing support. So for the rest of today, I want you to really think about what your school or school district can do to increase that practice from just training to coaching for implementation. So when we think about coaching, we define it as a set of activities that you're doing to build and support the capacity of implementation. We think about the school-based leadership teams to implement MTSS or PBIS. So different people take on different coaching. If you've seen our model, we talk about having different roles. So you may be a coach around data. Like data is your jam. You love data. I have a person that I work with in Monroe, data's her thing. She will coach on data. Some others might be you are knowledgeable about behavior systems, so you're coaching around implementation of interventions in the classroom for classroom management or even tier 3 and how to implement those tier 3 behavior plans. So there's multiple skill sets and everybody on a PBIS team has some sort of strength and they should be acting as a coach. So there's some just additional resources here. They're hyperlinked. So the link that Betsy's putting in the chat box will take you directly to that. So again, if you've never seen our framework, these are the different subsets of coaching that we say that are necessary on a PBIS team. If you remember that toy that little kids play with, it's the triangle and it's a 3D model, and then you have the little circles you add onto it. So you put the bigger one and then you kind of go up. We start with the bigger one as wanting to have somebody that really understands problem solving and facilitating problem solving, and that's using your data. Then we want to make sure we've got individuals on the team who have the ability to facilitate those team meetings and have really good interpersonal communication. Those who go back and train your team, as you know, our concept is we train the team and then the team goes back and trains the school staff. And then individuals that have that content knowledge. I mentioned data, PBIS, behavior principles. So having a team of individuals at your school who have that expertise, but not just at the school level, also at the district level, and having district level coach who have that expertise to support schools. I work with multiple districts that have multiple district people who are involved and take on some of these different roles when they coach the school-based teams. So again, problem solving, we just want to make sure that when our teams are meeting and we're coaching them, that they're using data, all 4 steps of the problem solving process, to help them identify what their goals are, to analyze why they're having problems. So if we're talking about office discipline referrals, starting asking questions, is it an increase? Is it an increase for specific behavior, specific location, a specific group of students? Then analyzing that to then come up with the interventions that we're going to put on place. So it's an ongoing iterative process. And we should be using it for progress monitoring and looking at our data and then saying, are we doing what we said we're going to do? Quick example of that one. One of a school I worked with, they said, well, we're going to implement positive referrals for students for recognition. It was something that was identified that was preferred from family members and from students and quite effective. When they went back and looked at how many positive referrals were being given, there were very few in relation to the enrollment of student population, and very few teachers were using it. So the staff that were using it were seeing positive results, but it was only a few students. So that's where we go back and look at, okay, we're doing this school-wide, how many staff are actually using that strategy? So I'm going to turn it over to Robin, and she's going to ask you some questions.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good morning to everyone. As Stephanie mentioned early, we like to learn from each other, and we know that you all have some great examples. We have some that we're going to share with you, and we've only identified a few things, but we really want to start off with hearing from you ways you check for Tier 1 systems level fidelity. So if you would in the chat box, and Betsy is going to read those off, if you would in the chat box, just identify a few things as a district leader or as a school leader. What are some things that you do to check for that Tier 1 systems level fidelity?
We already have two in there. The first one is ask the kids, which is great. And then Francine said annual walkthroughs.
Annual walkthroughs? Absolutely. We're coming up in Florida with that time of year in which we're encouraging our schools and our district coordinators to start those walkthroughs. And then we'll be leading into that end of year evaluation time. What else?
Chat with students, teachers, and staff.
Okay.
Walkthrough and discussions. So adding that feedback from the walkthrough. Walkthroughs and campus visits.
Great.
Monitoring data monthly.
Oh, yeah, another good one. What are the data telling us, right?
And then Aaron from Minnesota said DCA and TFI. So I think some evaluation instruments for Fidelity.
Yes, Fidelity. Yeah, I mean, you have to use those tools, right? They're our friends, even though sometimes we get bogged down and some of our schools find those as being kind of complicated and kind of a compliance check, but they really do give us such great information when we use those tools correctly.
Another one is checking for visibility, seeing if you
Okay.
see evidence on campus. Walkthroughs and discipline data. Using school-wide behavior data, external data collection like the SET or TFI.
Great.
Oh, and Chris Hines is asking, what is SET and TFI?
The TFI is the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, which is used nationally. In Florida, we use the TFI for our Tier 2 and 3. Some schools do use the SET voluntarily in Florida, but not always. Who put the SET in the chat box that can explain how they use it in their district or in their state or in their country? We have visitors from
That's Trish
Australia.
Wills. I believe she's from Australia.
Okay.
So just to let the Florida people know, the set is very similar to our walkthrough. So just a slight differences between the two. It is a research validated tool, and it does require some training and ensuring that there is some reliability between people implementing it. So, but it is very similar to the PBIS walkthrough that our state uses.
And I
Yes,
think I
and
just
thank you,
saw,
Kat. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Kat put the
yeah.
link to the set in the chat box if you want to learn more.
Yeah. So what is interesting is we will find throughout this between states that we have different evaluation tools that we use, and also internationally, but there's different tools that we use. So whatever works, great. So we had a few that we're going to pop up on the screen right now. So our benchmarks of quality, which is what we use in Florida. Some states still do use the TFI, which does have a Tier 1 component as well. Our PBS implementation checklist that we offer in the fall and the spring. So in the fall, that's our first kind of glimpse at, are we implementing Tier 1, Tier 2, and 3 with Fidelity, or what are our strengths? What do we need to work on moving forward? And the walkthrough, which has been mentioned a couple times, and then various surveys just to solicit our stakeholder feedback. Not sure if I heard any of that today, but we want to make sure I did hear talk with students, talk with teachers, absolutely. Think about talking with our families too and community members that tend to visit our schools. What do our climate surveys tell us about what's taking place? And then of course, our outcome data summary. So thanks everyone for chipping in. Our next question that you're going to be able to share with us is ways to determine if behavioral instructional practices are in place. So what will tell you if those behavioral instructional practices are in place? How do you check for that on your campus?
We have classroom observation, behavior data, walkthroughs, check for ODRs, check the ODR data. We check our school database for notice of concerns, school discipline events, and classroom data, walkthroughs, PBIS committee meetings.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Peer-to-peer mentorship amongst teachers.
Oh, that's a great one. Love hearing that. Love hearing that.
Someone also put on observations
Mm-hmm.
and teacher team reports.
Mm-hmm. Observation. So let's see, we kind of accumulated a few ourselves. So we want to make sure that there's a significant focus when opening each school year and also revisiting those lesson plans when we come back from a break, such as our winter break, our spring breaks, even a 3-day break, a 4-day break. We want to make sure that we're looking for those visual signs of assignments maybe posted in our classrooms. Maybe we're integrating our teaching of expectations and rules into assignments. And so we might be doing those walkthroughs. And especially as an administrator, when you walk into that classroom, you might be observing a lesson that's being taught, but you also might be seeing the results of an assignment that's been posted. So lots of ways to determine whether or not the behavioral instructional practices are actually taking place. Anybody on the chat today actually know if teachers are submitting their lesson plans to administration like we do academic plans, or is anyone uploading into Google Drive so that we can share with other teachers within or on our school campus? Just chat in the box if that's taking place at your school.
Robin, we have a district that I work with where they have certain deliverables. And so kind of piggyback on this, each school has to submit to, and it's a Google sheet, but it's submitted to their superintendent that they have to do once a 9 weeks a PBIS reteaching of expectations, and they have to submit some documentation of that. Videos, PowerPoints, materials that are being used. So it's not school-based, it's district-based, but it's a pretty cool way for them to do that.
That's terrific. And Michael's going to share a little bit more later, so he'll be chiming in and giving us some ideas. So we're going to look forward to hearing more from Michael on that. I just saw another person type in the chat box. Betsy, what was that?
Yeah, so Trish Will said that many of her school teams have lesson plans available for all
Okay.
classes.
Okay, great. That's wonderful. Yeah, sharing is caring, right? We want to make sure that we are being consistent in the delivery of our behavioral instructional practices, and that they're age appropriate, of course, and that they've been actually, approved by district. So those are all good examples. All right. And the last one we're going to ask you to share is on reinforcements. So how do we know that reinforcements are being used school-wide and that we have some fidelity of implementation with that reinforcement plan, whatever it might be, whether it's a token economy or our verbal 5-to-1, 6-to-1, whatever that might be. I see Brooke sharing some thoughts.
It was
Thanks,
to your
Brooke.
last question.
Yeah, I saw that. Thanks, Brooke. I saw that. Thank you. So how do we know if our reinforcement plan is actually being used school-wide? Again, data collection is going to tell us if something's working, right?
Yes, so we do hear data collection in the chat around reinforcement, walkthroughs, feedback from the kids, and so student interviews.
And those are all part of our walkthrough form that we do use in Florida, is that we actually will ask our students, randomly select 5 students and ask them about reinforcement. Have you been recognized? Have you been reinforced? Have you been taught those expectations? And if you've been reinforced, what were you reinforced for? That's another really important component, is in checking for fidelity. Do the kids really understand what they're being reinforced for and what we're looking for and what the expectation is? So we came up with some ideas of our own as well that we wanted to share. Stephanie mentioned earlier, positive referrals. One really, really easy way is to collect those and count them. Are all staff members using them? How many are being used at particular grade levels, gender, students? So we want to disaggregate that data as well to make sure that we are reinforcing all of our students. Tally jars. When I worked in a district, we had a big jar in the front of our office, and every quarter we would collect the tokens and we would dump them into the tally jar, and we would have, just kind of those tally marks as we went along weekly, and we could see if how many students were being reinforced, because we could see that their tokens were going into the jar. Some of my schools that I actually worked with had to sign out their tokens. So we had an actual running record that teachers were using their token economy system because they were requesting more. And then again, ask students if they received a positive referral, or even if any of their friends or peers have it and what it was used for. I like asking parents too, and parents just having conversations as I meet parents in the community, and we talk about, oh, what school does your kid go to? And they'll tell me, and I'll be like, well, do you know about PBIS? Do they know anything about expectations and rules? Do you know what PBIS is? Has your child been reinforced for following those expectations and rules? It's always a nice conversation to have with our community members as well. Okay. So enough of us talking, because I am super, super excited that Michael agreed to be part of this presentation today. Michael's contact information is listed there. He is part of the Palm Beach County School District staff. And next slide, please. A number of years ago, the school district applied for the School Climate Transformation Grant, and they are in their final year of a no-cost extension. So their first award happened in 2019, and they had several goals. And I'm only sharing 3 of these goals with you today because they're directly related to the work and the coaching that we're talking about. But the first goal that they really wanted to focus on was improving their attendance and behavior by integrating PBIS with skills for learning in life. So they knew they needed a curriculum. They wanted to make sure that they were focusing on teaching behavior and tying that into their already existing PBIS implementation plan. The second goal was then to increase knowledge of what SLL actually is and how PBIS and SLL work together, and then to increase that fidelity of implementation of SLL. Some schools had been implementing skills for learning in life and were not necessarily PBIS schools. So it was a great opportunity to start integrating the two together. So that was also a goal that they had. And then the third was to increase capacity, develop and enhance and expand those systems of support and technical assistance, with a key focus on improving coaching support and knowledge of PBIS and MTSS and those overall practices. So I want you to kind of, as Michael is talking today, think about the one slide where Stephanie talked about Joyce and Showers and that research on knowledge of content, skill implementation, classroom application, and adding that significant coaching component in order to increase that implementation with fidelity. And then also think about our wheel approach and all of those different layers. And we're hoping to tie that in and make a connection with you and walk you through the journey that Palm Beach has been on since 2019. Because it has been an incredible journey. And I'm just really, really happy that I've been and honored to have worked alongside Michael and some others in the district as well. So with that said, Michael, I am going to start talking and we're going to advance to the next slide. And Michael, please take it over.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. So happy to be here today with you all. And I think Robin said it perfectly there with our school climate grant, Project Connect, over the last 5 years. Just so much success with our schools, just building that core system of PBIS. And as one of our principals likes to call his motto, leading with love, right? And that's something I think a lot of our schools have adopted in that relationship piece. And I really liked how as Robin mentioned and Stephanie mentioned, with that coaching cycle, that really is the foundation of what we've been doing here in Palm Beach in this grant. And just everything from, the content knowledge and giving our schools that technical assistance and coaching that they need to be successful, and working from that tier 1 side, and then gradually getting into that tier 2 and tier 3. But knowing you have a strong core in place, and that speaks volumes to that MTSS component. And then the facilitated leadership and support and coaching these schools, and then problem solving facilitation, like it all tied together perfectly. So that's just a nice way to go into this TA chat today. So when you think about getting started here, and what does it look like in coaching our teams here in our Project Connect grant? We really had to start with that PBIS team itself, because I'm sure a lot of people that are on this call today, you can speak, to this as much as I can with schools that you support, where the, internal coach, the leader of that PBIS at their school is a one-man show or a one-woman show, right? And that was the thing we had to dispel right off the bat, right? This is a team effort, right? If you have your PBIS team meetings, we've made it a requirement, elementary, middle, and high, that your PBIS meetings had to have at least one admin, at least one member of your instructional staff, one non-instructional, one student rep, one parent rep, or one community member rep. And a lot of our high schools are using a business partner to do that. And that also feeds into their recognition system at their school, and being able to provide, some funding to kind of stock up that school store, if you will. But you had to have those components in there. And that's been such a big piece to it. When you think about, all those people that are on that team, and how that can help, drive those meetings, it's just so critical. Even on the elementary level, don't think that your 4th and 5th graders can't contribute at least a little piece to every PBIS meeting. Are they on there for the full hour? Hell no. But are they on there for those, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to be able to provide some input and feedback into how systems are working? Absolutely they are. And that's been a big help for them. And the other thing that we really defined for them too is the myth that their PBIS team had to be 50 people, right? Or in elementary, you had to have at least one rep from kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Absolutely not. If you had people that are devoted to the work and are ready to be able to support, your PBIS system at your school. I got one high school that has a PBIS team of 9 people, right? And those 9 people are able to be those PBIS cheerleaders on campus, to be able to then get everybody on board with what they're doing. I have one middle school that has 16, because it just works so well for them to have that bigger group, and they're still able to have productive conversations. So just being able to give them that's the pieces there are huge. The biggest piece I want to mention on this slide, though, is the relationship piece to it, right? And how having relationships was so critical. When we went into the beginning of our Project Connect grant, we actually had a meeting with every single one of our schools, with their admin team and their PBIS team, and we sat them down and we showed them, and we disaggregated all their data, and we showed them, here is the different pieces of data from your BOQ scores, from your TFI scores, your discipline data, your equity data, everything. Here's what we're seeing, right? And here's how you're doing with your SLL implementation. And what is it that you see that you all are doing well? What are some things that we see that are rock and rolling here? And what are some areas that we can work to improve on? But we had to establish that relationship with that principal first, right? That was one of my biggest pieces that I had to do, and especially even before those meetings took place, was I went in on that campus 2 or 3 times a week, just to be able to just have those conversations with that principal, just to be able to get familiar with them, right? It actually kind of worked out perfectly, because it was around that COVID time, and it was right when schools kind of reopened, but it was still that hybrid model. And so I was able to actually go on their campus, and there was hardly anybody there. And I was able to have like kind of a stationary office at a couple of the schools where the principals were a little bit, they didn't want to open up as much. So that really helped to kind of really establish that. But having that relationship piece is really crucial. And then giving them that feedback to know how it related to each other with that PBIS and SLL component, and marrying them together. On the next slide, there's obviously some barriers too, right? And that speaks into facilitated leadership and support in that coaching model. So what were some of those barriers that we encountered along the way? A big piece, the lack of support and leadership from our admin team. So even though I just told you I built a relationship with them, doesn't mean these are content experts in the work of PBIS, right? As you I'm sure know as well in your capacity, not every principal knows a whole lot about PBIS systems, right? So being able to get the schools, to have that that knowledge of what it is that we needed to be able to do to establish that strong core PBIS system on their campus was huge. the one thing I love about the benchmarks of quality and the tiered fidelity inventory is that those questions on there are so super specific that anybody that has some some support from someone to explain what those questions mean, once you understand it, like that really is the foundational piece of what you should be looking for at all three tiers, right? But that being said, principals don't know how to necessarily get to that point or what does that really look like on campus. And a lot of times, as we all know, those tools are so wonderful, but they're also perceptual tools, right? They're completed by your PBIS team. And when you're doing these tools, people like to inflate their scores, not because they pump their chest and say we're doing great, but because they may not know better, right? They may not, and obviously whenever we complete an assessment, think about like if you're doing a self-assessment about yourself, sometimes it's kind of hard to be completely truthful, especially when you're among your peers and doing kind of a tool like this. So we had to really break down the BOQ and TFI, and we had meetings the first year to be able to give them that honest conversation and be able to facilitate that discussion at the table of, all right, you gave yourself a 96% on the BOQ. However, let's do it together. And it turns out they were like 60%, right? And then we had an action plan around that. But a big piece was they didn't really have that technical assistance. So I came in with a map of or a menu rather of all the different PDs that are good starters for their PBIS systems. ABCs of Behavior 101. We did a little bit of classroom management integrated with SLL and getting morning meeting and community circles in middle school and high school started, and how building relationships were a big key of that, teacher-student relationships. And it really just took off from there. Obviously, a big barrier, staff turnover throughout these 5 years. Every time we had a rock solid principal that really did a great job in turning around discipline data, just 2 years ago, one of our high schools, they dropped their discipline referrals by 46% in 1 year because she had a renewed focus on PBIS systems at the core level. She rocked it. Yeah, she's gone. She's at a different school now because she did so well. They were like, "You did so great. We thank you for your work." And keep in mind, she was only at the high school for 1 year, and it was amazing. And they said, "You did such a great job." And they took her and they put her somewhere else, And it was like, if you really thought about that, that's probably the worst thing you could have done, right? Like, but staff turnover has been a huge piece to that. And then, of course, balancing priorities, because as we know, PD days are great, but when academics are involved, it's like PBIS is always kicked to the curb, right? So we got to find that way of just being able to infuse, that training however you can. And for us, that was a matter of doing a lot of work with PLCs and being able to help with that. Next slide, please. So when we look at the review of discipline data, one of the biggest pieces in our district is that we love that we're a data-rich district. However, being data-rich is also, it's good and bad, right? Because we have two systems that report discipline data here in Palm Beach County. And one of them is our student information system, and the other one is called the Educational Data Warehouse, right? EDW. And I don't know about you in your districts and how many data sources you have across Florida, but here we have two, right? And so a lot of times when we had schools that are reporting their discipline data and their outcome data summaries on the FLPBIS platform, they were reporting numbers from EDW and some were reporting numbers from SIS. Little did they realize they were reporting two different completely numbers. They were reporting on two completely different numbers. The SIS numbers were reporting on total events that occurred, while EDW was reporting on incidents. So obviously, if you have an incident on your campus, one fight, you get one referral on the record. If you do events, then it's how many students were actively involved in that fight. So let's say there were 7, now you're going to see 7 referrals on the other system. So people were reporting numbers on to our outcome data summary that just were not valid and reliable because they really didn't know what they were reporting on. So it really came down to getting that school to know a little bit more about what are our data sources that we have, what do they mean, how do you interpret them, how do you use them, how do you analyze them, and then from there, just looking at your data trends. We have a risk ratio tool. Obviously, the FLPBIS is created and shared with us the equity profile report. We actually were able to make kind of our own system here in Palm Beach County that inputs that data for you. And on the spreadsheet to give you those numbers in real time, right? Because sometimes schools have a hard time populating that data themselves. So we actually made a tool that actually does it for them, and they're able to get the risk ratio in real time, anytime throughout the school year. So just giving them that piece was huge. And that goes to the problem solving component of that coaching cycle, right? Being able to identify what areas of need do we really want to focus on. On the next slide, this is always a big key, and I'm sure you and your districts are probably battling this as much as we are. Does the evaluation data match the discipline outcomes, right? So then, it came down to, especially in those first 2 years, we would see that, their school had, the 99% BOQ, they have the 100% TFI score. On the surface, like, they claim that they're rocking and rolling, right? You go out for their model school walkthrough, you ask 5 students, what are your school's universal guidelines, or you call them whatever they call them, right? What are your what does the Blue Marlin Way stand for? They couldn't speak to it. You ask them, have you received a behavior recognition, like a point system? Yeah, I got a point because I was in detention. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just, they're not there. So that walkthrough score came back like 50%, and then you have to have a real conversation with them about, well, all right, so this is what's really happening. This is what your claimant's happening. So what's the disconnect here? What can we, how can we, have better support you? And how can we, and then we develop plans about PBIS boosters, get those students to know the universal guidelines, get the teachers to be able to use that as part of their common language. But you know, but once they better understood some of those evaluation scores, and they understood how that walkthrough can really help influence what PDs they needed moving forward, that really made a big difference in being able to actually have a time where they had conversation around like what PD was most relevant. And also, I made an Excel sheet for them that had the BOQ, the TFI, and some perceptual data measures. There, the self-assessment survey and the student or the SEQ, the student effectiveness questionnaire, which are perceptual data points about PBIS systems on their campus. And I just gave them like a percent positivity. So, like, for example, if the self-assessment survey showed that staff perception of tier 1 systems was 80% in place, but you're claiming you're 100% on your BOQ, that's a big disconnect, right? You claim your systems are 100%, your staff claims are 80%. So maybe we need to have more conversations about how your staff can help better understand what is in place on your campus, or maybe we just have a little gap here, right? So review of evaluation data was a big piece of the puzzle. And then on the next slide here, what are we seeing here when we're on campus? I think I was just so excited to say that I spoke too early on that, but that's kind of what this one shows here, right? When we meet with admin, that's when we really had the opportunity, to be able to identify what areas of concern, we saw from, actually walking on campus, talking to students, talking to staff. How does that match your discipline data? If you go on a campus for a high school that has 2,000 referrals in a school year with only 1,800 students, and nobody knows their universal guidelines, but you claim that you're, rocking it on your benchmarks of quality, like that's not happening, right? So then but it really came back to that PD menu and that technical support that we provided to help them with that. And we saw a lot of good, results from that. When you look at the next slide here, are there trends over time? And looking at our ODR rates, and then your ISS and the OSS numbers, there has been quite a shift, in looking at discipline referrals across the state here. And I know Robin and Stephanie, you can feel free to jump in on this as well. But just looking at how many of our students are having those ISS and OSS numbers here in the Project Connect grant, they have just gone down so much because of that renewed emphasis on strengthening that core system. And there's been kind of a push as we've expanded this out district wide a little more, that people are seeing the results of our 9 schools in the grant, and now are extending that some of those practices going forward. And you see on there, the ISS and OSS numbers, you look at the 3-year change on OSS, for example, from 2020 to 2021, it was down huge numbers, but then the last couple of years we've been steadily going, kind of increasing it again. So just working on those PBIS systems and making that a priority is really huge. And then why is the problem occurring? So when we think about, going back to the whole problem solving piece of that coaching model here, the biggest thing that we had here was, you know, trying to get our schools to better understand, why are some of these problem behaviors still occurring, right? Even though we have our training, we have our systems, on, from those original trainings that we did in year 1 and year 2 of the grant, the ABCs of behavior, the interventions and consequences, starting, morning, meeting, right? But what was that real core issue? And it was just, the tier 1 system just wasn't quite built as much as we wanted to yet. Tier 2 and tier 3 systems, it's a matter of they don't know what they don't know, right? And when a big piece, and I'm sure all of our DCs here can remember very well, last year especially, was that when we had these schools submitting their artifacts for model school, when they wanted to submit progress monitoring and then Fidelity, they had no freaking clue what they were doing. Like they had total opposite perceptions of what those are. And so having to do more technical assistance and ongoing coaching and support with these schools to help them identify what data decision rules could we use for tier 2 to identify those students that are even in need of a tier 2 behavior intervention. What are some systems that we have in place for tier 3? Professional development for our teachers was huge, and mapping that out with them of what that would look like. So it's just kind of building up more and more. And then if you look at some of our schools that were decreasing discipline referrals, then other schools were curious about, well, what are they doing that we're not doing, right? And a big piece of that came to relationships. Obviously, skills for learning in life, formerly called SEL, is a big piece of the puzzle here with these 9 schools, and they're all doing either daily morning meeting in elementary, they're doing some form of explicit SLL instruction, whether it be a community circle, signature practices like a welcoming ritual, optimistic closure, things like that. In the middle and high school setting, and all about relationships. I was just talking with an AP who's the internal coach at one of our high schools. The one that I put in, the one that I mentioned had over 40% decrease on discipline referrals just 2 years ago. And I was talking to her, and she said, she's talking about this school year. She said this school year, she says, Michael, I've been here for 12 years. This is the first school year that I feel like this is a brand new school. I have students that if they had beef with someone, they would fight them on campus. Absolutely. They would have no reason not to in their mind. But now I have students that come to me and they say, oh man, Ms. Lingerfeld, I'm tell you right now, I'm really, really, ticked off at so-and-so, and I'm not going to fight her because I wanted to come to you first and I want a mediation. If I don't get a mediation by Friday, I'm telling you, I'm going to fight her. And she was like, I got you. I'll make sure that I get you that our mediation meeting. But like they come to them, and let them know about how they're feeling so that they can work on something prior to fighting like they would have done in years past. Like that takes a big systems change to happen like that, right? And it goes back to building relationships. Obviously that student had a relationship with that administrator, much like they have relationships with their teachers, because they're greeting at the door. They're greeting with a purpose. Obviously they have the SLL time where they're building connection with both the trusted adult in the classroom and their peers. Like the whole package just seemed to work really well, and the results have come from that. And you look at disproportionality, that was a big piece of why we had that equity profile report that PBIS magically created for us. That's why we have that in-house and with real-time data, so that our schools always know when disproportionality in their discipline data is there, and so we can take steps to help correct that and give them some feedback of what practices they could work on to help change that. On the next slide here, developing and implementing a plan. So one of the things that we were doing here was, strengthening that tier 1 system, reteaching those expectations, and starting with the administration and the PBIS team. One of the things that we were able to develop with all of our schools was a bank of PBIS, the beginning of the year lessons and booster lessons. Every school has a hard set of that. And the PBIS team, when they're reviewing discipline data every single month, they're able to see what trends are we noticing in our discipline data. From that point, if we see a spike, for example, in elementary and physical aggression, perfect. We have morning meeting in our schedule. Let's pull some morning meeting lessons on coping skill strategies. Let's do a whole week's worth of morning meeting lessons that focus on relationships with our peers, how to make friends. So they're able to use those SLL lessons to be able to help address some of those discipline behaviors. But it all starts from that PBIS team and the admin who are monitoring that data with my coaching and support to know exactly what SLL ties that they can make to address some of those behaviors. All of our schools were trained on relationship-based practices. When you go on campuses, you hear that effective statement language. I feel frustrated when when I hear you talking over me because I'm trying to, help you to hear all of my directions so you're successful on this project. Like you hear the effective statement language and you see the tension, decrease in de-escalation techniques, right? Like it's all because of that relationship-based practice, effective statements, the circle time in secondary, the morning meeting, which is the circle process in elementary, all those have worked so well. We have a Calm Corner initiative that all of our elementary schools have participated in, which have dropped their physical aggression discipline referrals leaps and bounds because not only is it a Calm Corner, but it's also part of an SLL curriculum piece that teaches kindergarten and first grade students how to identify their emotions and strategies and coping skills to regulate their emotions. And that has been such a huge piece. We actually have that now in 28 schools in our district as a cohort right now. We're up to 3 different cohorts. I just pulled data from that yesterday. Every single one of our 28 schools has shown a decrease in physical aggression referrals that are part of that cohort. Like it's been so successful. And then of course, coaching and support. The big piece of the puzzle here, is I know that I'm not going to be able to go in there and coach teachers at these 9 schools like I have been over this 5-year time with the grant, once this grant finishes in June. So I shifted my focus from coaching teachers to coaching admin. So now at every one of my schools, I have carved out sessions where bi-weekly I'm meeting with at least one member of their admin team. And I just spend about 2 or 3 hours with them. We walk on campus, we check out a few classrooms, we action plan on what are some things that we could do to coach and support our teachers with their classroom systems, with some of the things that we're seeing, from our students with their behaviors? What are some PBIS boosters we could incorporate? But I'm coaching the admin on what to look for. I'm using the classroom assistance tool, the CAT tool that FLPBIS has when we're doing this. We're able to use the classroom workbook that FLPBIS has wonderfully created and has been a big PD of mine. And if you want that PD, that I made the classroom workbook into like a slide deck almost. Email me, I'll send it to you. But we have all these different tools when I meet with them and I coach them on what are some things you should be looking for, what are some things that are actionable items that we could do, and that's going to be able to have that sustainability piece and bridge that gap over the next couple of years, as opposed to me just going in working with teachers and they don't have any clue what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. But now I'm giving you the tools to be able to help on your campus. So that's been a big piece. And then the evaluation piece on the next slide here. Did it work? Heck yeah, it worked. You look at our end of the grant results here, elementary school discipline referrals in our 5 years, comparing last year's discipline data to the first year of Project Connect data. ODRs decreased by 38% across all of our elementary schools. Physical aggression decreased 18%, beat the heck out of our district average. Middle schools decreased by 54%, rocking that. That speaks to 2 principals who literally always say leading with love and building relationships first. Obviously, that's a big piece of the puzzle with the SLL component. And then high school's repetitive disobedience referrals went down 26%, which obviously beat our district average. Last year for model school status, I know that's not the end all be all, but it just kind of helps kind of support, what we're doing and give us that validity. Last year, we had 78 schools in our school district that were eligible for platinum model school status. Only 9 schools in our district, however, qualified for even gold or platinum level. Just 9 out of 78. And out of those 9, 7 of those 9 schools were part of our Project Connect grant schools. And the other 2 schools that received the platinum status, one of which was a former colleague of mine working on our SLL team, and now she's the AP over at that school. And So I actually coached her quite a bit for the last 3 years. So even though they weren't part of the grant, they still received ongoing support. They received all of my technical assistance chats that I've been doing over the course of the year. I do 5 TA chats every year with our internal coaches, and she's part of that. So I consider them part of a Project Connect school. And the other one was the AP over there is now our MTSS coordinator for our district. So I think that they knew what they were doing, and he always reached out to me for support too. So definitely uh, a plug for why this works. And then on our last slide, it's just speaking to the coaching and support, 794 coaching sessions with teachers over 5 years. Like that was obviously a huge component to why we were so successful. But 522 admin and coaching support sessions, that number has really increased in the last 2 years because of that renewed focus of coaching the admin, not the teachers, to be able to help create that sustainability and be able to give them the tools that they need to be successful. And 994 PD sessions, whether that be relationship-based practices, whether that have been ABCs of behavior, interventions, and consequences, whatever it was, the classroom workbook, it just going through those PLC sessions, we just had just a great job of our schools did a great job, I should say, of giving us the time to go in on our campus, even if they couldn't devote a whole PD, just going through PLCs, just going through breaking up a PD into 4 faculty meetings, whatever it was, we were able to make that work. And then being able to present with Robin and the FLPBIS team at a couple of APBS, PBIS Leadership Forum conferences on restorative practices, relationship-based practices, that was pretty awesome. So our last slide here, at least for me, and then I'm going to turn it over to Robin, sustainability. So how do we get it to sustain our work? We actually kind of branched out a little bit now. Has from our 9 schools, I kind of sort of support now with over 20 in our district, and a big piece of that is the bi-monthly technical assistance meetings focusing on SLL PBIS best practices. So all the schools in our Project Connect grant and all the other ones that I've kind of branched out to are open to attend that, and they usually do. And it just goes over what are some PBIS best practices from some of those national briefings that you see on the National Center website, FLPBIS updates that they provide us in those newsletters and in our DC meetings and here in our TA chats. I just give them some of those pieces, and then just reminders and best practices of things that should be happening, both PBIS and SLL wise, and then always give them time to have some shout outs. And then the biweekly admin meetings, as I was telling you about, just build that capacity of what to look for using the CAT tool and the classroom workbook. And then those regularly scheduled PBIS and SLO walks using district created forms. That just means that we have like a climate and culture walkthrough form, and we do that twice a year just to be able to see what's happening on their campus, and just some look fors of what could be celebrated and what could be improved upon. I attend every one of their schools' PBIS team meetings that are just for our 9 schools, just to offer coaching and support for that IC. I'm kind of sort of tailoring that off this year because the grant's ending, so I'm giving them more freedom to do it kind of without me. Just trying to phase it out little by little. But that was a big, thing that I wanted to make sure happened throughout the grant, and especially for those evaluation and monitoring tools, just because we all know that some of the scores are always kind of inflated. So that kind of wraps it up here. I did see a question in the chat box. I love this, but I have a question around focusing on coaching admin. I have a very transient admin. Would this change your focus? Probably not. I don't think it necessarily would, just for the fact that when I go in there, it's not like it's not like I have like a coaching plan per se with like one specific admin. It's just I go in there and I rotate my cycle of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade APs at middle schools, high schools, and then when I go in there, it's just a matter of a pre-scheduled walk where they know that I'm going to be there for 2 hours on Tuesday. So we just do our walkthroughs, we action plan together, we talk together. So it really doesn't matter if you have somebody that's brand new or someone you've been doing this with for 2 years. Like, as long as you have that relationship with the principal where they support you coming in to be able to have those walk and talks with the admin and give them those coaching and feedback, I think you can still be pretty successful. And then I appreciate your hands on the pros, mate. Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it. All right, and I'm gonna turn it over to Robin for our last slide.
And I don't even know what to say after all of that. Really, this last slide is just intended to kind of wrap it up and put a nice little bow on it. But in terms of looking at PBIS with Fidelity, that ongoing collaboration and communication, building of relationship, skill acquisition, and really including all of those stakeholders and building a plan for maintenance and sustainability at PBIS. So it's, again, moving away from individual coaching and seeing ourselves as individuals, working with individuals, and moving more into that team-based approach and really understanding what does the team need, where are they, and where do we want to go. And yeah, we're all very transient. We know we have administrators, teachers, that are transient. Hopefully they're staying within your district, but if not, you know, PBIS kind of tends to stay in your heart and you take it with you wherever you go. Michael's got several administrators that are perfect examples of that. Administrators that were at very difficult and challenging schools that moved to the district level that are now trying to, you know, spread the love and the wealth amongst many more district schools so that they can build capacity and really impact more students. It's a very large district. For those of you that don't know, they have 200 schools. They started the School Climate Transformation Grant with a cohort of 9, and then they moved into another 9, and it's really grown substantially since 2019. So that's what we had planned for you. I see there's 3 minutes left. I thank you all for your questions and comments. Just going to open it up now. If you want to unmute or if you want to type into the chat box, if you have a question for myself, Stephanie, or Michael. And before you leave, please do not forget to complete the poll that Betsy has just put up for you all. And I thank you for being here, but we will certainly stay on and entertain questions and comments.
Thank you guys so much. That was amazing. What a great chat. Really appreciate you joining us today, Michael.
And Michael, I don't know if you've had a chance to read all the comments in the chat box, but there's a lot of appreciation for what you're doing and your presentation today. So I know I appreciate that. I want to make sure you saw those comments.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. My contact's on the slide, so if you want any of the resources or have any questions later, just email me and I'll be happy to support.
And a slide before our contact information does, and you all can download the chat and the presentation, but we did link to our district level, school level coaching resources, as well as problem solving resources and our PBSES user support resources, which also help to decipher a lot of that end year, mid-year evaluation results and tools. So thanks, everyone. Michael, thank you so much. And Stephanie, thank you. And thank you to team members for being here to support us. Thank you.